My dad stole every dollar I had saved to start a new life and used it to take his other family on vacation. That's how I found out an Instagram post. He was smiling wide on a beach in Miami, cocktail in hand, arm wrapped around his wife and her son. The caption read, "Family Trip of the Year Unforgettable Moments." That same morning, I stood in my tiny Portland apartment staring at my bank account, $267 left. My heart stopped. I had saved two 800ers, every late shift, every skipped coffee, every dollar carefully tucked away for a studio apartment I'd been dreaming about for years. Gone. I checked the withdrawal records. It was taken in cash, in person, using my ID. The moment it hit me that the man I trusted most, the man who raised me after mom died, had used my own trust as the key to rob me blind. I couldn't breathe. And it wasn't just about the money. It was the betrayal, the choice. He had a whole new family now, and I was just the ATM he didn't have to ask. You might think there was some explanation, some apology. But what came next was worse than I ever imagined. Before I share my story, I want to know you're here with me. Just say, listening in the comments, or let me know where you are. I love hearing how far my story reaches. Sometimes, even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. And if you want to follow stories like mine, stories of betrayal survival and finding your voice again, please subscribe to the channel. It means more than you know. Thank you. And now, here's my story. When I think back, I can still see it. The dusty light from my one narrow window in Hawthorne, casting long shadows over the stack of moving boxes I had just started to fill. I was 25, working part-time at a cozy little bookstore tucked behind a coffee shop in Portland. My paycheck barely covered rent, groceries, and the occasional secondhand book, but I'd done it. I had saved, $2.800. Every cent of it was supposed to go toward a new start. A studio apartment with a view of the Willamette River, a balcony where I could read in the morning sun. Something simple, but mine. After Mom died, when I was 16, it had always been just me and my father, Raymond. He'd done what he could, I guess. Then came Brielle and her teenage son, Mason, and suddenly, family meant something very different to him. He remarried, moved to the suburbs, but still came by my apartment a couple times a week, said it was on his way to work. I never questioned it. I let him come and go, even had no problem with him borrowing my phone to check traffic or sports. That was just us. We had this thing, open devices, open trust. It was stupid. I see that now. The day it all shattered was supposed to be a good one. I was going to pay the deposit for the new apartment. I remember sitting at the tiny fold-out table in my kitchen, sipping watered-down coffee, feeling quietly proud of myself. I logged into my banking app to double-check the balance. $267. I stared at the screen, blinking like that would somehow change it. I went to the transaction history. There it was, a cash withdrawal of $250 from the downtown Portland branch dated 2 days ago. My ID had been used. I froze. No one else had my wallet. No one else had access to my account. Unless they'd seen the login when I wasn't paying attention. Unless they had watched Memorized Planned. I called the bank. The rep on the line was polite but firm. Since the withdrawal was made with my ID and all the correct credentials, it wasn't considered fraud. It was an unauthorized use by someone I had apparently trusted. My stomach twisted. Raymond. I didn't want to believe it, but the longer I sat with the thought, the harder it became to ignore. Desperate for something, anything that would prove me wrong. I opened Instagram. Wyatt, one of Raymond's buddies, had posted a string of pictures from Miami. There they were, Raymond, Brielle, and Mason lounging in beach chairs, sipping colorful cocktails with those little umbrellas. The caption read, "Family Trip of the Year. Unforgettable Moments." I couldn't breathe. That trip was my deposit, my future, My reward for 2 years of sacrifice. I stared at Raymond's smile in a photo, relaxed, proud, like someone who hadn't just stolen from his only daughter. I called him, straight to voicemail. Later, he texted, "Hey kiddo, just out with friends, back tomorrow." I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor of my apartment numb, watching my bank account load again and again as if it might magically refill. For the first time, I doubted the one person I had always believed would protect me. And that doubt, it was colder than anything I'd ever known. Raymond showed up the next evening like it was any other night. He walked in with a bag of takeout whistling, like the world hadn't shifted beneath my feet. I didn't say anything at first, just pulled up the Instagram post on my phone and held it out. His smile faltered. He looked at the photo, exhaled, and set the takeout down on the counter. "Yeah," he said. I took the money. But it wasn't for anything bad. It was for the family. My heart pounded. What family, I asked, already knowing the answer. He didn't say my name. He didn't apologize. It was a bonding trip, he said. Like that explained everything. Something Mason's been needing. You wouldn't get it. I stared at him, stunned. You think I wouldn't understand needing stability? I've been scraping together that money for 2 years. He interrupted with a laugh. Zin, it's 2/800. It's not like it's life-changing. You're acting like I burned down your house. I couldn't believe it. He leaned against the kitchen counter like this was just another argument, not the moment our relationship unraveled. Then he said it 5 words that I would never forget. Relax. You'll get over it. I told him to leave. He blinked, surprised, like I had somehow become unreasonable. Zin, I've been using this place to crash between shifts for months. My commute's brutal without it. You're really going to throw me out. I held the door open. If you've chosen your new family, then this place isn't your home anymore. He left, but not before shooting me one last glare, one of those twisted, wounded expressions that said, I was the villain now, that I'd somehow wronged him. After the door shut, I stood in silence, feeling a pain so dense it swallowed everything. Not anger. Not yet. Just this gaping, hollow grief. I called the bank again. The representative explained once more that since Raymond had my ID and likely saw my login, it wasn't legally theft. I'd have to pursue a civil case if I wanted to reclaim the funds. That night, I changed all my passwords. I reset my email accounts. I scheduled an appointment to have my locks changed. I wasn't taking any more chances. But it wasn't just about security. It was about trust, about realizing that the one person I thought would always be there had willingly, casually chosen to take from me and didn't even think it mattered. I sat in the living room surrounded by silence and started writing everything down in a notebook. I needed to make sense of it to see the words on paper. I remembered every time he'd borrowed my phone to check traffic, every time I'd left it unlocked while cooking or cleaning, every little act of convenience that had piece by piece handed him the keys to my life. Had he planned this? Was it impulsive? I didn't know what hurt more, the premeditation or the indifference. Under the dim light of the lamp beside my couch, I wrote the final sentence of that night. I didn't just lose $200 or $800. I lost the illusion that I had a father I could trust. I didn't go to work for 2 days. After Raymond left that night, something inside me cracked in a way I couldn't fix. I stayed in bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, hands, numb, heart heavier than it had ever been. I tried to distract myself, TV, books, food, but nothing stuck. My body was there, but my mind was buried somewhere between disbelief and humiliation. I checked my bank account at least 20 times, not because I thought the money had magically returned, but because some desperate part of me hoped this was all a bad dream that might correct itself. The number never changed. 267. A balance that mocked me with every glance. Then came the message. A number I didn't recognize popped up with a text that read, "You're being ridiculous. Raymond's heartbroken. Don't ruin this over nothing. Talk to him." It was from Tucker, Raymond's longtime friend. I didn't even bother replying. I blocked the number immediately, my hands shaking not with rage, but with sadness that this was the story he was spreading. On Friday, Sienna insisted I get out of the house. Just a couple hours, she said gently. There's trivia night at Honeybrew. Honeybrew was our comfort spot, a little cafe with velvet booths and fairy lights, the kind of place where you could pretend the world was okay for a little while. I agreed mostly to get her off my back, but deep down, I hoped that normalcy might find me there again. And for a moment, it did, with hot cocoa warming my hands and the soft thrum of jazz in the background. I laughed, really laughed, at one of Sienna's dumb jokes. I felt my chest rise freely like I could breathe again. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something better. Then I returned from the restroom, and everything collapsed again. There in the back corner of the cafe sat Raymond. Alongside him were Wyatt Tucker and Brielle. My father was sipping something that looked like espresso and laughing at whatever Wyatt was saying. I froze mid-step. I could feel my hands go cold, my cheeks flush with a rush of humiliation and fury. Wyatt spotted me first. He rose from his seat with a theatrical grin. Hey, look, it's the prodigal daughter. Heard you lost a few bucks and lost your mind, too. I didn't respond. My legs moved on their own, closing the distance between us, like my body needed confirmation that this was real. Raymond turned to me, face neutral, not a hint of shame in his eyes. You should unblock my number, he said flatly. We need to talk. You're blowing this way out of proportion. It's not stealing. Families share? I stared at him. Then why didn't you share with me? He blinked. No answer. Then Brielle jumped in. Her voice was laced with condescension. It's honestly sad, Zinnia. You're causing this much drama over a few dollars. It was $5 to $50, I replied, forcing my voice to stay calm. And it took me over a year to save that. She laughed. A full, loud, mocking laugh. Then that's even more pathetic. Nearly 30 and still scrambling for pocket change, I looked at Raymond waiting, hoping for him to say something to defend me, to at least tell her to stop. But he didn't. He just looked away, down into his coffee lips, curved into something that resembled a smirk. Sienna was beside me before I realized it. She took my hand and whispered, "We're leaving." She brushed past Tucker like a storm, shielding me as we walked toward the exit. Behind us, I heard Brielle giggle and say, "Good thing you didn't let her drag you down." Huh? I didn't cry until we were outside. The moment the door shut behind us, the tears came fast, unstoppable. Sienna hailed a car, wrapped her arms around me, and didn't say a word until we got home. That night, she stayed over. We ordered pizza, drank a little too much wine, and sat cross-legged on the floor. I cried some more. She let me. Then, she picked up my phone and helped me block half a dozen more numbers. By the end of the night, I was exhausted, but not alone. That mattered. I woke up with a throbbing headache and a crust of dried tears on my cheeks. The apartment smelled faintly of garlic and Merlot. Sienna was still asleep on the couch, tangled in a throw blanket, one hand clutching the remote. I reached for my phone, not sure what I expected to see. There were no missed calls from Raymond, no voicemails, nothing in the text. But in my Instagram message request it was a message from Brielle. At first, I rolled my eyes, but curiosity won. The message was longer than I expected, written in paragraphs, not her usual flippant tone. She said Raymond told her I didn't need the money, that we were estranged and he hadn't been part of my life for years. She claimed she didn't know the truth, that if she had, she never would have agreed to go on the trip. That this wasn't the first time Raymond had done something like this. He'd lied to her, taken money before, and always spun it as something noble. She ended it with, "I'm not taking sides. I just want you to know I wasn't in on it." I read it twice, then A third time, I was sure what emotion I was feeling. Relief, anger, pity, maybe all of them. I forwarded the screenshot to Sienna, who replied, simply, "She's not innocent. Don't let her rewrite her role." She was right. Raymond had told everyone a different version of the story, had manipulated them the same way he'd manipulated me. I didn't know which version of himself he believed, but I knew the damage he'd done was very real. That day, I called my landlord and requested the locks be changed. I told him Raymond no longer had permission to access the unit. He didn't ask questions. He just said it would be done by the end of the week. I also opened a new bank account at a different institution. I transferred what little remained and deleted the app from my phone. That account was dead to me now. Sienna helped me box up everything Raymond had ever left at my place: an old coat, his toothbrush, some socks, even a charger he always forgot. We packed it into a cardboard box and left it outside the door with a note that said, "There's nothing left for you here." But I wasn't finished. I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in a while, my grandmother, Raymond's mother. I didn't give her a long explanation, just sent the screenshots, the bank documents, and the photo from Wyatt's vacation post. An hour later, she called me. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "I don't know who he's become. He used to be such a good boy." She apologized over and over, promised she'd talk to him. I said nothing for a moment, then thanked her. I hung up, not knowing whether to feel vindicated or heartbroken. That night, I sat in my apartment again, alone, but stronger. The locks were changed, the digital doors were secured, and the emotional ties had been severed. In my journal, I wrote, "When someone takes the most precious thing from you, don't ask them to give it back. Build something they can never reach your strength." The sleepless nights weren't just about anxiety anymore, they were about fear. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, or worse, that I was still being followed emotionally, psychologically, and maybe even physically. Every knock on the door made my chest tighten. Every shadow under the hallway light made me hold my breath. That was when I knew I had to get out. I found a small studio in Selwood, farther from work, farther from downtown, and most importantly, farther from him. It wasn't glamorous. The paint peeled near the windows, and the heater made strange noises at night. But it was mine. A lease for 6 months was all I needed to rebuild something safer. I didn't tell anyone except Sienna and Jasper. I made them promise not to mention it to a soul. Raymond couldn't know where I was going. I needed to disappear, not because I wanted to vanish, but because staying put meant being vulnerable. I scheduled the move for a Tuesday afternoon when Raymond was supposed to be on a double shift. Jasper brought his old pickup, and Sienna arrived with coffee and duct tape. We packed everything I owned in less than 4 hours. I was sealing the last box of kitchen stuff when my phone buzzed. It was Danny, Raymond's coworker. He left his shift early, said he was sick. I barely had time to process the message before I heard footsteps in the alley behind my apartment building. And then I saw him, Raymond, standing at the end of the driveway, his eyes scanning the scene. His face tightened as he recognized Jasper, the boxes, the open back of the truck. "What the hell is this?" he yelled, striding forward. I didn't answer. Jasper started the engine, the rumble filling the silence. I climbed into the passenger seat without a word, without a glance back. As we drove off, I saw Raymond still standing there, fists clenched, expression twisted with something between betrayal and disbelief. But I wasn't the one who had betrayed anyone. The silence on the drive to Selwood was heavy. I couldn't speak. My mind was replaying the look on his face over and over. For everything he'd done, a part of me still felt like that little girl, hoping he'd chase after the car, apologize, tell me it was all a mistake. That part of me was quieter now, but it hadn't died yet. In the days that followed, the quiet was broken by messages from unfamiliar numbers. The first few were simple: apologies, promises. Then came the guilt trips. You've torn this family apart. You've abandoned your father. You'll regret this. One morning, I opened my door to find a plain envelope on the welcome mat. Inside was $300 in cash and a note scribbled on the back of a receipt I sold my gaming system. Hope this helps. Love, Dad. A few days later, another envelope appeared. This one held $500 and a full-page letter. He wrote about pressure, about how hard it had been to hold everything together. He said he didn't know how to be a father to two families. He said he was sorry, but also that I'd made it worse by going public. I stopped reading after the line that said, "I've never stopped loving you." One night, my phone rang. No caller ID. I answered by instinct. His voice was slurred low, full of wine or whiskey or both. "You ruined everything," he mumbled. "You really did." I didn't say a word. "If you don't come around," he snapped suddenly, "don't blame me when this all gets worse." I hung up and saved the voicemail. Then I sent it to Sienna and Lena, just in case. Things only escalated from there. Tucker, always eager to defend Raymond, posted a lengthy rant on Facebook. He called me a liar, a thief, and his favorite insult, ungrateful daughter. He said I had bled Raymond dry, then spun the narrative to make myself look like the victim. People in our little community started to whisper. I could feel the change at the bookstore, the shift in how some customers looked at me like I was contagious. Then came the message from Mason. 16, still in high school, a boy I barely spent time with. "Can you please stop ruining our family?" he wrote. "My mom cries all the time. Dad says you hate us because you can't stand not being the center of attention." I stared at the message, reread it, and felt a pain I hadn't anticipated. Not anger, just sorrow. Mason was being weaponized. He was collateral in a war he didn't understand. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I walked out to my car and found the front tire flat. No note, no nails nearby, just deflated rubber and a horrible silence that made my skin crawl. I didn't know if it was him. I couldn't prove it, but I knew. I began documenting everything. Screenshots, voicemails, messages, camera footage. Every knock, every shadow. I had no intention of waiting for something worse. I had to act. We met at Sienna's apartment just after sundown. Jasper brought takeout. Lena flew in from Seattle. We sat around Sienna's small dining table like it was a war council. And in a way it was. I laid out the evidence, every voicemail, every note, every social media post, every dollar shoved under my door in a desperate attempt to buy back control. Lena was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You need legal protection. This isn't just emotional manipulation anymore. It's harassment." The next morning, I met with a lawyer Lena knew. We filed a restraining order at the courthouse in downtown Portland. I submitted the voicemail recordings, photographs, screenshots, and a copy of the letter where Raymond admitted to taking the money. The judge reviewed everything and issued a temporary order. Raymond was not allowed within 500 meters of me. He couldn't call, message, show up at work, or send anyone in his place. If he violated the order, the consequences would be criminal. But that wasn't enough. Jasper, brave as ever, took to social media. He wrote posts not emotional, not vengeful, just facts. He shared screenshots of photo from the Miami trip and a quote from Brielle's message, admitting she didn't know the full truth. The response was immediate. Tucker deleted his accusations. Wyatt sent me a private message apologizing. And a few former neighbors who had believed Raymond sent quiet, awkward messages of support. Raymond didn't stay silent. He sent a letter through my grandmother. It wasn't apologetic. It was a threat dressed in finality. "If you take this to court, don't bother calling yourself my daughter again." I folded the letter and placed it in the same folder as the rest of the evidence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. That bond had broken a long time ago. This was just paperwork. A few days later, I filed a civil suit to recover the $550. The lawyer assured me we had a solid case. The withdrawal was documented, and his written admission was hard to dispute. We included the bank statements, the text history, and his own handwriting as part of the claim. The court issued a hearing date. I marked it in red ink on my calendar, not because I was scared, but because I was ready. The restraining order was now official. He was legally obligated to stay away. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. I no longer hoped he'd change. I no longer needed him to understand. What I needed, what I demanded, was justice. Not just for the money he stole, but for the girl he failed to protect. And now, I would protect her myself. The morning of the hearing arrived with a stillness that felt unnatural. There was no chaos, no panic, just a cold certainty in my bones. I met my lawyer outside the courthouse in downtown Portland. It was cloudy, as if even the sky didn't want to look down on what was about to unfold. We stepped into the courtroom, and there he was, Raymond. He sat alone, without counsel. His clothes rumpled his face thinner than I remembered. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his collar, but he didn't meet my eyes. The court clerk called the case number, and I rose with my attorney. We submitted everything: the bank statements, the messages where he admitted to taking the money, the handwritten note saying he sold his gaming console to repay me, the restraining order records, and the evidence of continued harassment. My attorney argued clearly, methodically, with no dramatic flair. Just facts. She said, "This is not just a father who borrowed money. This is a man who abused access and trust. This is theft regardless of shared blood." Raymond didn't object. When the judge asked him to speak, he didn't deny anything. "I took the money," he said softly. "I thought she'd understand. I thought I was doing what was best for my family. I was wrong. But I'm her father." The judge remained expressionless, flipping through the documents before making his ruling. "Mr. Raymond is hereby ordered to repay the amount of $2,150 to Ms. Zinnia Thompson, along with interest and legal fees. Payment shall be made in monthly installments based on his income. Failure to do so will result in further legal action." That was it. No drama, no shouting. Just a verdict. Clear and final. After the hearing, I gathered my papers, preparing to leave. That's when my grandmother appeared from behind the courtroom bench, a small wooden box in her hands. She approached me slowly, as if afraid I might walk away. "This is for you," she said, her voice shaking. Inside the box were childhood photographs, a worn journal with my mother's handwriting, and a small silver necklace with my name engraved in cursive. "I hadn't seen it since I was 10. Your mother would have wanted you to have these," she said, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Raymond, he used to be good, but I don't recognize him anymore." I hugged her gently. She smelled of lavender and old wood. I felt warmth in her embrace, but no longer felt any thread tying me to the man she had raised. That night, I received an email from Raymond. The subject line read, "No longer your father." It was a single paragraph. "I get it now. You don't need me." Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it always was. I was never meant to be a great dad, but even if I never said it, I was proud of how strong you turned out. I stared at the screen for a long time. There was no anger, no sadness, just an emptiness that settled in gently, like dust on an untouched shelf. I didn't reply. 6 months later, the restraining order was up for review. My lawyer advised renewing it just to be cautious. I signed the extension without hesitation. I knew I was no longer under his shadow. I was walking on my own path now, one not carved by family history or obligations. That night, I sat by the window in my apartment and wrote in my journal, "I didn't lose my father because he died. I lost him because he chose to stop being one. But I didn't lose myself. And no one gets to take that from me again." Returning to the bookstore felt like stepping into sunlight after a long storm. The familiar smell of old paper and fresh coffee brought a comfort I hadn't realized I'd been craving. My boss promoted me to shift manager, saying she admired how I held myself together. I smiled and nodded, but only I knew how many nights I'd nearly broken apart. I didn't aim for a new apartment or a new car. I aimed for peace. I started saving again, not for something big, but for something stable. I dreamed of building a cozy corner in the bookstore, a reading nook with soft chairs and gentle lighting, a place for people to come and breathe. I joined a support group for survivors of familial betrayal. It was held in a small community center downtown once a week. The first time I sat in that circle and heard other voices speak pain that mirrored mine, something inside me loosened. I wasn't alone. I never had been. Lena invited me to Seattle for a long weekend. I was hesitant at first, but she promised it would just be quiet time. No probing questions, no Raymond talk. She kept her word. She introduced me to a few distant relatives people I hadn't seen since I was a child. No one mentioned my father. They asked about my job, my hobbies, my plans. On the drive back, Lena handed me an old photo album. Inside were pictures of my mother, holding me as a baby, laughing in soft sunlight, my eyes blurred with tears. Family, Lena said, isn't who gives you their last name. It's who walks with you through pain. Back in Portland, Sienna and Jasper became my anchors. We made a tradition of spending Sunday mornings at the farmers market afternoons, reading in the park, evenings cooking meals none of us were good at making. One day, while organizing the art section at the bookstore, I bumped into Eli, a quiet man with kind eyes and paint-stained fingers. He had been a regular for years, always asking about new releases in graphic memoirs. We started talking more, not about the past, just books, music, food trucks. He never asked about what happened to me. He only asked about what made me feel alive. 3 months after that hearing, I opened Z's reading nook inside the store. A modest corner with a small sign, plants in mismatched pots and shelves curated with books on healing resilience and rebuilding. On opening day, Sienna brought pastries. Jasper brewed coffee. Lena sent flowers. Even my grandmother came walking slowly with her cane, her eyes filled with pride and sorrow. I didn't invite Raymond, but I knew if he had ever been the father I needed, he would have been proud too, quietly, from a distance. That evening, I stood outside my apartment in Selwood, watching the sky turn gold over the Willamette. I didn't feel heavy anymore. I didn't feel haunted. I didn't feel like someone abandoned. I had lost money. I had lost trust. I had lost a man I once called my father. But I had gained something bigger, my own voice. In my journal, I wrote the final line of that chapter in my life I haven't forgiven, but I've outlived the pain. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes the deepest betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the people we once called home. But healing doesn't always mean forgiveness. Sometimes it simply means choosing peace over pain and growth over guilt. We don't get to choose the wounds we carry, but we do choose what we become because of them. If this story moved, you share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to like, follow, or subscribe. Your support truly means the world.